Hello again, everyone. The ways in which adults present and introduce new foods to children can have long-term implications for their relationship with food, and this can be both positive or negative. A shout out to anyone who has ever made to sit at a table until you finished your veggies and eventually had to choke them down. So we wanted to share some general do's and don'ts when encouraging children to taste new foods. First, always be positive. Positively encourage and reinforce that any and all participation is good. Always acknowledge effort, because often the biggest efforts result in the smallest outcomes, like teeny tiny tastes. And once you recognize that, acknowledgement of those efforts means a lot to children, especially nervous children. Relate any portion of your food activity to the curriculum. When trying anything new, food or not, children will likely be nervous. By connecting any portion of the food activity to something they have already learned about or are learning about in the classroom, it can help to give students a point of reference that can completely change how they approach the activity. Next, don't allow children to declare that any food isn't good. Instead, encourage children to say they don't like it and work towards being able to express why. With the exception, a child should not be able to say they don't like something they haven't tried before. Instead, they should be encouraged to say that they're nervous to try it, as it's completely normal and quite understandable to be nervous when trying new things. If they have tried something similar, they can explain what it was about that they didn't like. Next, use positive peer pressure, but to a point. Getting children to go outside of their comfort zone to try something new is never easy. And, to a point, having children see their peers challenging themselves in a similar way can be very effective and motivating. But there is a fine line between positive peer pressure and bullying. In our experience, if a child begins to shut down or withdraw from the activity, it's probably best to let them be. Make sure people don't pressure them, as it can make a child feel like they're not allowed to set their own limitations. And ensure that it's okay for them to say, "Today isn't my day to try this." Instead, continue to keep them present and engaged. Encourage them to continue to watch and observe their peers' experience. You may be able to bring them back into the activity at a later point. Tough love is generally not a good approach with children who are nervous. So when it comes to peer pressure, take a cautious approach. Don't forget that some students have more heightened sensory experiences, especially with taste. Stop using food as a reward for good behavior. For example, if you behave or achieve a task, you get candy. Using food as a reward or as a punishment is rarely a good idea for children, or for all adults, to be honest. It can lead to a lot of unhealthy food behavior. Instead, use other things to reward behavior, like stickers or fancy erasers, or outdoor free time, or general free time, etc. Tasting new foods often requires encouraging children to push their boundaries and risk being uncomfortable for a moment or two. But children should always be allowed to set their own limits. As this will look different for each student, it's something you'll need to pay close attention to. But try not to let overly cautious or food-anxious children simply not participate if they say they're uncomfortable. Most students, with a little or a little more positive encouragement, will be able to find a way to taste something. In some cases, students will need a lot of support in order to begin tasting anything new. If there are some children who will find touching, smelling, or even being around new foods overwhelming, in these cases, encourage them to still be involved in the activity in any way that they're comfortable. And this may involve lowering your own expectations for them a little. Don't set or enforce any blanket rules around tasting, not including the language used. This means telling a group of children that they will have to taste something, especially at the beginning of an activity, could likely result in some children checking out or just not wanting to participate at all, as they may become consumed with the knowledge that they will be forced to taste something unpleasant. Remember, for food-nervous children, the anticipation of trying something new is the worst part 99% of the time. Don't ridicule or even focus on children who have a strong negative reaction to tasting something new. Sometimes children will make a big production out of something that they don't like. This is where it's okay to point out that an overreaction to not liking food is a pretty silly thing to do. Encouraging them to discuss using positive constructive language, what they didn't like, and encouraging them to not use any of those objective words like gross or disgusting is the key. Don't forget to remind students that it's okay to not like new foods. In fact, it's important to understand why we don't like certain things. We at Growing Chefs often observe parents and teachers scolding children for not liking new things. Instead, continue to encourage them to use the tasting strategies we've discussed and remind them that their taste buds will change and to keep practicing trying new things. Another tip is to share and discuss your past negative experiences with food, or share your own personal stories about struggling with liking healthy foods. There is a myth that adults shouldn't discuss their own struggles, particularly with healthy foods, and that they should simply model good behavior. They should, but being real about your own journey can really help children who are having a hard time. If youth have had a bad experience with a certain food as a child, chances are good that that food was cooked badly, presented in a negative way, or associated with punishment. Teaching food skills and how to properly cook vegetables empowers students to cook food properly and can completely change the way that they taste and eat any foods. But it may take some practice. Trying out some new approaches and a lot of patience will get you there. In the next videos, we're going to begin to explore some strategies and example activities for bringing food education and food into your classroom. See you then, and thanks for watching.